Hi traders, welcome to the lines lesson. In this lesson, I will explore with you the line functionality in PineScript. So by lines, I mean literally lines. So we can draw lines across our charts if we want to. So this is obviously useful for detecting things like trend lines. It's pretty difficult to do that in PineScript, to be honest with you, but it can be done. So I won't be showing you how to do that in this lesson. We'll save that for a future lesson maybe, but it can be done and it can be achieved using lines. So right now I have a couple of lines of code here, basically a blank script. We're just plotting NA to the chart so that the script will compile. Let's uncomment this line of code here. So here I'm creating a new variable. So lines are objects. We need to assign them to a variable. They're not like plots and plot shapes and things like that. You can assign them to variables as well. But when it comes to lines and labels, and tables, they are basically their own object. So before we begin, let me explain what this code here is saying. So the line function takes 4 coordinates, x1, y1, x2, y2. x1 is the bar index that you want to start drawing from. y1 is the y-axis, so the up-down axis that you want to begin drawing your line from. x2 is the bar index that you want to stop drawing your line on. And y2 is, again, the y-axis, the up-down axis, the vertical axis that you want to stop drawing the line on. So what this line of code here will do, will create a new line. So we use the line.new function to generate a new line. And I've passed in the bar index of 10 bars ago, the low of 10 bars ago, the current bar index, and the current high. So what this should do, in theory, if I count out 10 bars, it should draw a line from this candle's low to this candle's high. But one problem we'll have with this code is that this is generating a new line every time a new bar is analyzed by our script. So we're going to have lines drawing everywhere. There'll be one line, unique line for every bar you see in our chart. So if I save this script, now that I've uncommented this line of code, you'll see what I mean. Let's save the script. And there we go. So we are drawing from this low to this high, like I said, but we're doing that on all of these bars. And there is a limit to how many lines you can have on your chart. So we run out of our quota, our line quota around here, because we are drawing lines on every single bar to the right here. The way we can stop that is by deleting this line on the next bar. So what I mean by that is every time a new bar begins, we can delete the previous line. And what that will leave us with is just one line on our chart. So if I use the line dot and then hit Control Space, here are all of the line functions we have to work with. I'm not going to go over all of these in this lesson because there's just so many here, but they're pretty self-explanatory, most of them. So because a line is an object, you need to use these inbuilt functions to tell PineScript what to do with that line. So for example, before I show you how to delete old lines, let's use the setColor function. To do that, we need to pass in our line ID, or variable in this case. So here you can see I've assigned this new line to the variable called myLine. Now I'm using the line.setColor function to tell PineScript to change the color of my line to, let's set it to color.orange. Now when I save the script, all of our lines should turn orange. There we go. So that is something that will take a little bit of getting used to in PineScript for you, especially if you are experienced with other programming languages. In most other languages, you would be able to do something like myLine.setColor, and then you could set the color directly onto the myLine variable. In PineScript, things work slightly differently. We need to use the inbuilt function of the line library and pass in our myLine variable or ID. And so there are a lot of complex things we can do with lines. We can get the x1 and x2, y1, y2 coordinates from existing lines. We can get the price of an existing line. We can set the width. We can set the style. We can do all kinds of things. Basically, everything that you can set when you create your line for the first time can be modified using the line namespace functions. But I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information here. So let's just delete our old lines. So for this, all I need to do is say line.delete my line. And if I were to do this now, if I were to save this script, then we would get no lines drawing onto our chart because we are creating a line and then immediately deleting it. But if I add the historical operator onto this variable, so we're telling PineScript to delete the previous line on the previous bar, now when I save the script, we will only get one line drawing onto our chart. This is the line being generated on the current bar, and it's being generated on the bar 10 bars back. The line coordinates begin on that low, and they draw to the high of the current bar, which is what these four variables here do. Bar index of 10 bars ago, the low price of 10 bars ago, and then draw from there to the current bar index and the current high. So that's really it for lines. That's the basic functionality of lines. Now, we could get very, very complicated with this. We could create an array that stores the previous 10 pivot points. So in PineScript, a pivot point would be something like this swing low here, this swing low here, this swing low here. We could get the past couple of pivot points and draw a line between them, which would give us a potential trend line. But in code, it's far, far more difficult to tell your script to identify things that you can easily see by your eye. So that is a challenge you will run into in your coding journey. I'll do my best to help you with that, but it is not an easy feat to achieve certain things in code. Now, detecting candlestick patterns is a totally different story. Detecting indicator conditions, like if price is above a moving average and we get a bullish engulfing candle that happens to be a swing low, that is a candlestick pattern I like to trade in my personal trading. If I have a 50 EMA and we get a bullish engulfing candle after a pullback and the engulfing candle is a swing low, that can be a great trading opportunity, pullback trading opportunity. That is very easy to detect in code. Detecting a trend line, on the other hand, is a whole different story, because where do you start drawing the line and where do you stop? Do you draw it like this, across these two highs? Do you draw it across this high up here and this high up here? And then in your code, how do you tell PineScript which high is important, which high is not important? We'll address that in future lessons because it is a very complex subject, but that is just something to think about when dealing with lines. It's not as easy as it might seem to use this line functionality to detect trend lines or flag patterns or anything else that you would typically use lines for in your analysis. But anyway, let's wrap up this lesson by having a look at these other parameters we have to work with. So xlock sets the X location of your lines. So by default, it's set to bar index. So whatever value we pass in here will be a bar index, but you could change this to bar time, and then the line will be based on time. So I could change to time, and then x2 is time plus 60. Let's see what that does. Save the script. So we're on a daily chart here. If I drop down to a 1 hour time frame, actually, let's go down to a 1 minute time frame. So here we are adding 60 milliseconds, I believe, to the x-axis. Let's try 60 times 1000. See what that does. Save the script. We are still only drawing on the next bar. Let's try times 5. There we go. So now we're drawing our line 5 minutes into the future. And if I wanted to draw back 5 minutes, I could put a minus sign here. And now we're minusing or subtracting 60 times 1000, which is 60 seconds, or 1 minute, times 5 is 5 minutes. So that is how you would draw lines using time as your X location. Let's go back to bar index and change this back to bar index 10 and bar index. Save that. So now we're drawing from the low of 10 bars ago back to the high of the current bar. And let's move on and have a look at some of these other parameters we have to work with. And I can get rid of this xlock parameter now because bar index is the default xlock value anyway. Now let's move on and have a look at the next parameter, which is extend. So if I type out here extend equals, and then I need to write extend dot control space. Now we have these few options here. By default, extend is set to none. So we are not extending the line past the final drawing point. If I set it to right, now the line will extend off our screen to the right, like that. If I set it to left, it will do it the other way. We'll be extending it to the bottom left. And if I set it to both, you guessed it, we extend in both directions. So that is what the extend parameter does, and I believe it extends it indefinitely, infinitely. Anyway, let's move on to the next parameter, which is color. Obviously, you can change the color of your line. Let's change ours to color dot. Let's go with fuchsia, however you pronounce this color. I've never learned how to properly pronounce this color, even though I use it quite a bit in some of my scripts. There we go. The Mace Windu lightsaber color. I do like the look of this color on a dark background. Let's look at what else we have to work with here. We have style. So this sets the style of the line. So if I set our style to line dot and then start typing style, we get all of our line styles as inbuilt variables. So there's a whole bunch here. I won't go over all of these to save time, but let's set it to dashed for now and see how that looks. And there we go. We have a dashed line style. And then the final parameter we have to work with this function is the width parameter. So let's set our width to, let's try 5 and save the script. There we go. We have a very thick line drawing there now. If I get rid of the dashed style, we can get a better idea of how thick that line is. And I mean, that's really it for the line function. In future lessons, if you guys are interested in using the line function in your analysis, we can look into practical use cases for this function. But for now, I'll leave it there. This is the basic section of the course. I'm just introducing you to these functions. And I think this is a pretty detailed intro to the line function. This covers all of the function parameters we can use when generating a line. And as I mentioned, if you want to play around with some of the line manipulation functions, so things that change the style of our line, you can use these inbuilt functions here. So for example, you could set the style. Where is set style? Set style. You could change the style of the line based on a market condition. So we could say here, if the current close is above its open, then set the style to line dot style dashed. Otherwise, set it to line dot style solid. Let's save this code. And now we have a dashed line if the current bar is bullish. But let's go up a time frame here. And now we have a solid line because the bar is bearish. Anyway, that's it for the line lesson. I'll speak with you in the next lesson. Take care.